We build our lives around the word mine. My house, my body, my partner, my truth, my job, and so on. Yet everything we call mine is already leaving us quietly, moment by moment, leaving us questioning, was this really ours to begin with? The skin, it regenerates. The house that we once lived in, we say goodbye to. And the stories that change us and shape us, they too, are they ever really yours? So then, when it comes to exploring the truth of you, what then do we ever truly own, and can we call our own? So in today's episode, we're going to be going very deep into the concept of ownership, which is part of this first spell of civilization. I bet you never thought of it in that sense. It's so ordinary, it is hidden in plain sight, yet it drives economies, marriages, nations, and wars. For sometimes it provides stability, but other times it breeds separation. So we're going to be tracing the anatomy of that spell. How much of your actions day to day, how much of your goals are tied in to a construct ultimately, and how a simple claim can become the cornerstone of your whole reality. So we're going to go from law to the psyche, from the soil that we want to call our own, to our soul, which we also seek to call our own, into many of the world's contracts and the cosmos itself, and then coming back to the small circle of our own lives. And somewhere in between this conversation, we'll meet the truth that ownership is never really about things. It was about fear, a very deep-rooted one. And when that fear dissolves, what remains is stewardship. That's not a word that you commonly hear in modern discourse. This is the mature art of caring for what moves through us without trying to cage it. Welcome to Resonant Truth, where do we even own this podcast?
I mean, where do you start with that? It's that was a powerful intro as well. I just want to state that, Eleanor. I think most people have never actually stopped to consider the concept of ownership to even begin, or even understand what ownership really is when we get down to the bottom of it.
So much of the trials and tribulations of the shadow work was through, well, in my case, was holding on to things, holding on to situations, people, outdated beliefs.
Can you care to give us any examples?
Well, there's many. I mean, even holding on to the concept of being the good daughter, which came with a lot of roles and contracts and things that I had.
Owning that title.
Now, of course, I was unconscious, and I remember walking out of an acupuncture session, and I don't remember what the theme was exactly. It might be about letting go or something like that, and it just hit me as soon as I walked out that there is nothing to hold on to. There is...
At all. Like in the entire universe.
I don't know how far that went, but I think it was maybe more
like echoed down the hallway of your psyche, and you're just like, maybe this was too much for you in that one moment.
It was more situational to what I was experiencing, but also the stories and the perception of self. And, I don't know if you remember, but the very first astrology reading I had, which just threw me into absolute despair. Oh, no, maybe not despair. That's too strong of a word for early on in the journey.
It's funny how we had very different outcomes from our first astrology reading.
Very much so. And you specifically told me that the hardest thing to do is commit identity suicide. And I remember journaling about that. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what I'm holding on to. I am the construction coach.
I'm not holding on. You're holding on.
Yeah. And it just kept on going on and on and on. So, ample examples. But before we go anywhere, just set the baseline for us. There are legal definitions when it comes to ownership. So, what is it?
I mean, and this is something I've looked up because I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. And so, what we have clearly defined is around the claim. And so, in legal terms, a claim of ownership is a declaration of right. Someone saying, "This is mine," expecting others to agree. A claim requires 3 elements. The first being the claimer, the second being the object that it claims, and third is the witness or witnesses who actually agree and uphold that claim. And so really what we understand is that ownership itself, the claim of ownership, is nothing more than an agreement. You get rid of that, and the claim itself actually really can't hold form from there. Does that...
So we're all just shaking hands and writing things down on napkins.
Well, I mean, like, really, what is ownership if it's not people agreeing that someone owns something?
Well, we'll talk to this in continuity, but this is, how countries exist, why we get to live here, because there is an agreement. Can you give the example of something that's quite common, especially in Australia, or not common, it's common everywhere, but Australians are pretty obsessed with home ownership. Can you talk through how mortgage and even that concept of home ownership is a claim, really?
Well, I mean, thing is, it's not about the home, it's about the land that has the value that they're really trying to claim through capital growth. And so how many people are going out there with, 20% is the standard, but some lenders offer now 5% deposit, and then I've even heard 0% down, and it's like, I own my house, and it's like, you carry this enormous ball and chain you call a mortgage, which is an enormous liability, and if you bought a house that already has defects that you have to work on, you're now underwater. So then what is it that you really own in this case once you actually balance the books? But then if you even do have a paid off property, you're still basically forced into paying rates. And even that, the Crown has the ultimate claim of ownership over the land that all of its subjects live under the 1901 Australian Constitution. So at the end of the day, do you really own your land if the Crown can take it away from you?
It's a 99-year lease as well.
I worked in aviation previously, and that's what the federal government did when they privatized all of the land, is 99-year leases on all of it, on all airport space.
And it really tests this construct of, again, home ownership. What do we own? And there's many different examples that we can continue, but you also had the concept of possession is 9/10 of the law. Can you explain what that means as well?
It's not a literal term. It really just means that if you use something, if you hold something, or if you control it, most of the time it's fair to assume that the person is the owner. They hold the claim of ownership over it, unless another party can prove otherwise. And that's the numbers aren't important, but really it just shows that to prove otherwise, the cards are stacked against you.
Now there's many worldly examples, but when we look at ownership as a type of armor, but what we're starting to realize is the pattern that these claims of ownership, their consensus, these are not truth. And we'll take this more to, different dimensions, but we look at bringing it closer to home. The childhood is mine. That's my child. That's
the terrible twos coming online. The sense of ego identity. Mine. My toy.
It goes
not the other kid.
This is a child starting to learn the possession, the concept of possession, and what it means to either have or not have. We were talking about this episode, and you were also bringing in the reference about Fight Club. I have not seen the movie, so can you give a brief example, but also what does this have to do with the concept of ownership?
So Fight Club is a phenomenal movie, and I really don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't, but it really talks about corporate consumerism. And the main character basically was working the office job, buying everything from, I want to say like the IKEA equivalent. He had the picture perfect apartment, and very early on in the movie, and I won't spoil too much, very, very light spoilers, nothing important, his apartment blows up. And rather than being devastated at losing everything he had worked hard for and built towards, he realized it was just a shoebox of stuff that really wasn't important. And that there was his own initiation into freedom from consumerism, because he believed he owned the stuff that he bought. And really, by realizing that he didn't own it, like, what's the point of owning anything if you can lose it anyway? And that's when he started to tap into a larger truth of essentially breaking free of the shackles of this belief in ownership as well. And I think that although that's not what the movie is ultimately about, it's almost it's woven into the narrative that plays a very important part in how the story continues to evolve from there.
I know that's a movie you want us to watch, and
definitely.
I have a backlog of movies that we will watch, but we'll get to it.
We have a parchment that we've been growing over many years now.
I think we've watched like 5 movies. Taking this to a very worldly, real life worldly example over history is real world tensions over invisible lines, borders, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. This is proof that belief in possession still kills. And there was a book that I recently read about Cyprus, and I had no idea about, anything about Cyprus other than it's an island in Europe and beautiful and so on, but how much of it is absolutely ravaged and savaged in recent history. And it is still a divided country. So the south is, Greece has taken claim over it, so Greece Cypriots, and the north, Turkey has, I'm probably not getting the term correct, but the Republic of Turkey or something, but Turkey is the only one that recognizes that. No one else does. And they still inhabit the north as Turkish Cypriots.
So who owns it is really just the claim that everyone agrees on. We come back to the principle.
Exactly. And we're going into the detail, but the bloodshed that not just Cyprus but this whole world has seen because of beliefs that one political party or religious party or tribe or sect, whatever you want to call them, has right over a certain part of this part of the world.
And that's another thing as well. It's like all the bloodshed. It's like, is the nation claiming the lives, like ownership of the lives of its citizens, either to fight in the wars or to be stuck there and become either prisoners of war or ultimately, victims of it. That's another thing as well that can tend to lead down conspiracy theory routes, which we'd rather ignore for this podcast. But it's still really important to consider is who's making the claim of ownership here as well.
I think you mentioned it this week after certain discussions about patriotism, about how deadly patriotism is as well, when people believe that the group that they identify with have the right. And that also means inherently they take on the right to kill, to destroy, to wipe out, at whatever cost, in order to uphold this perceived right that we own this for whatever reason.
That's constructed,
that no one can actually have any, proof for per se, but you've all collectively agreed in something. And look how deadly and savage and torturous the concept of ownership when used in such contexts, and it goes untested what it does to the fabric of our consciousness and what it means for humanity as well.
Well, the thing is, it's to claim ownership over, even something at that level, it's also to basically claim, like we think of Israel Palestine for example, and that Israel claimed the right to that land. But what about the Palestinians that are occupied in like Gaza and these other spaces?
Bank,
It's really a case of their belief is so strong that how many are actually willing to question how they should treat those people? Because that claim of ownership, as you said, like it's so strong that it becomes very easy to, and I don't know if you've really looked into deeply the 10 steps towards genocide, or the 10 psychological steps towards genocide. But this level of differentiation as well also gets interlaced in with this claim as well. So it's like it's our land and they're occupying it and they are beneath us and they are this, and it's and I don't want to single out the Israel-Palestine thing, even though it's a pretty contentious issue, surprisingly in Melbourne of all places, Melbourne, Australia. But this is something that's been done throughout history. This is just a classic example of what's happening right now. But this is not a new game to the human race. No. And it's not one that doesn't have severe consequences. Because really, these fictions and these stories that we uphold and that give claims of ownership to people or like groups of people or to a nation state or anything like that. We have tended to value those claims more than the lives of the individuals that might get caught in the crossfire of that claim.
When you put it like that, we're defending these stories or these claims as if they were lives. And it's like, we have a lot to attest for, because if this is where humanity's standing. Moving on, Mela.
Yeah, let's. You mentioned stewardship in the intro, and I think that's a very interesting word that I don't know if many people have actually heard and understand what that is.
Not at all. Well, ownership is saying I control this, but what does stewardship say?
Well, stewardship is a completely different relationship. It's a different state of consciousness altogether, because you might think of, again, the terrible two as a mine sort of energy. And we sort of see that people building empires and it's mine. They build businesses and it's mine. And is it really? People who raise children, this child is mine. They're my property. No government will tell me what to do with my child. It's ownership claim. And that's really the wrong way to look at it. Stewardship is a completely shifted worldview and relationship to living in partnership with someone or something else. And so stewardship really is understanding that everything has its own path, it has its own story, it has its own right to exist. And stewardship is about existing in a conscious relationship with it. If you're a parent, you understand that your child is free and sovereign in the way you are, but they need support to come into that. Like we're raising a garden at the moment. We understand that these plants are their own. They're their own unique beings that have different nutrient needs, different watering needs and such as well. They need to be repotted at different times. But we're the stewards of these plants. We don't just own them. Even though we can sit there and claim, and it's going to sound a little weird if I start telling our neighbors that we own our garden, but how we relate to it is really a powerful it's a shift in the state of consciousness. And it's more of a maturing than it is of just choosing to see it differently. It's starting to drop that notion that I get to control this, and understanding that I ultimately can't control someone's destiny, but I can provide support and participate in that process co-creatively.
Well, parenting is a primary example of, you see this in many cultures where I think we've mentioned it before the child is born, their retirement plan is for the child to take care of them. So they go out of their way, they bend over backwards, they put themselves possibly into financial distress to get them to the best school so they can go to the best international universities, to come home to get the best job, so on and so forth, so that when they're old they could all buy a house together or something along those lines. Like,
I'll provide you this now, or I'll do what I can now, expecting you to pay it back. As if it's a form of contract. And really, if you think about it as well, and we'll speak to this further, but claims of ownership really are a type of contract. And that's also part of it's the problem in the principle of the situation, because really, and God, we can speak to this, but what does a child ultimately owe their parents if the parent is the one who brought them into existence? It gets pretty deep and metaphysical pretty quickly, which we can speak to, but probably not in this episode.
We'll come back to it. And I like what you said about, stewardship as, we are temporary in this. We have the responsibility. We're given a temporary right to be in a relationship with, let's say, a child or, this friend, or, to live in this house. I mean, we've heard about like the people who've lived in this unit before us, and then what we've done with the place. And I've said it before that we will go down as the best tenants, that these walls,
the golden years,
the gilded age of this place. And it's such a beautiful thing to give this experience to someone else. We understand that we'll be here, we'll make the most of it, and then we won't.
We've even channeled houses and how they actually feel about its residents as well. And that's a very interesting thing, because we didn't expect that to happen the first time.
Not at all.
And it just fell into it. And it's like, you don't think of a house as its own conscious entity. that has its own desires of what it wants to be and what sort of tenants it would like. Because we just look at houses just as a property. It's just ownership. It gets back to that same principle. And as I mentioned before, you've got the one who's making the claim and then the object. So the contract of the claim of ownership actually requires an objectification of whatever it is that you claim to own. And that there is also, it's moving away from the subjective interpretation of understanding that everything is its own entity. It has its own conscious awareness and maybe not even awareness in the way humans do, but its own experience
of itself.
But this is probably above most people's direct experience, because we've had to use trance states to realize this.
We don't sit here and consciously
ask the house how it's doing.
I mean, you can get a feeling, but
except when I speak to the garden, I do ask how they're doing.
They do very well,
and they talk back sometimes,
as they would. Caring for something that exists beyond us is also how we get into that conscious maturity and that conscious relating as well. And you see relationships where there are deep power imbalances, or people who can't get out of certain situations, in our case, the parent-child relationship, because the claim to owning each version of us, past, present, and future, was so strong that getting out of those contracts took cosmic level of work as well. And I've shared in past episodes like some difficulty or challenges in getting out of contracts on this level, because again, those claims of ownership run so deep in people's psyches.
Can I say, like, when you say cosmic level of energy to get out, it's not like it's enormous, but what it requires is something that is so altered, that is so, you have to understand how working in these states actually plays out. But really, it's just getting to a deep state that you can understand what's actually happening and how it can be changed. It's like some problems, can just be changed by, just fixing something or thinking differently about it. But, think of someone with depression and it's like, be happier. It's like, yeah, thanks, I feel a lot better now. It's like, that doesn't work, because you haven't gone to the right depth of the level of the problem consciously to understand exactly what's happening to that individual. And that's ultimately sort of a disservice that we do across so many domains. And in this case of ownership, again, we're failing to understand where the entity itself is at. And so when you mentioned before that, caring for something, when we move beyond the concept of control and this ownership element of it's mine, and we actually even just role play the concept of stewardship, it's opening the door for us to mature into our higher selves and ultimately our soul's essence. Because there's now room to grow within yourself up from just the human ego that we think we are into something so much bigger. And unless you have an expanded worldview, then how can you begin to live from an expanded state within? And that there is really why practicing stewardship is such a powerful concept that we've both taken on and continue to explore, and why we feel more people should continue to understand what it is first of all, and then begin to practice integrating that in their life, however it is, no matter how small. I mean, even, like my car, the little Focus, I've got a little Ford Focus, and the stuff it has moved. The gratitude we have for this car, I show it extra love just because it's done so much for us, when other cars, I mean, even ones that look bigger probably couldn't do what this little car has done. But I do feel like she looks after us, simply because we look after her too. We're good stewards. We're good stewards. That's it.
We are good stewards of it. This idea of ownership was also seeded. It's not something that's found in the natural world. You don't look at the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and I mean, plants, sure, they might compete for space, but there is a coexistence, a shared level of resources that they have between them. You don't look at a tribe of...
But even the way, like, can I just add on that with plants? Like, it's just, and I don't want to go Darwinian with survival of the fittest, but it's just, they just do what they can to survive and grow. It's not about, this is my space, I choose to deny you from it. It's out of the way. I'm growing. And I've claimed, yes, they've claimed it, but they've claimed it by just doing it, not holding a claim and say every other plant around me agrees that this is my space.
Imagine that to be the case. Same as animals and elephants.
I hate to see plant litigation.
So this came from, what is considered a survival instinct, but has been weaponized, top down as for power. If we removed the concept of ownership, how many economies, how many industries would cease to exist?
The concept of economy is built all on contracts, and ownership is a central principle to that. Because even looking at paying taxes, for example, is upholding systems that hold claims that it has a right to tax, that has a right to exist to provide services, whether good or bad.
Yeah.
There are some important ones that, I don't want to sit here and say that because this claim of ownership is false that we should just dismantle everything. I don't want pandemonium, but I do feel it's important for us to understand how this script runs almost completely unquestioned by most people.
Well, that's why some people get so entrenched and enmeshed that they can't leave, because there are contracts that have written contracts that have, something that came to mind is divorce settlements that go on for years because of estates and everything. It's like...
They claim to own this part.
And I claim,
I claim the dog.
Yeah, I'm sure there's case studies where that has gone to court for a year. But this is something that, again, unless these words, like we discussed adulthood, without looking at what lies under the hood and how we are so intricately intertwined with these concepts, how much are we able to experience our truth and what it means to be in our own essence? There was a bit of research that we were doing prior to this episode, and just going back to the concept of property, there was a 17th century English philosopher, John Locke, and he was the one who made the claim that mixing one's labor with land made it your own. So because I toiled this land, then I'm the one that, it's mine now.
And that's a powerful principle as well, because by working on the land, you are the one essentially who owns it. But that's speaking to a different element of, think of people living overseas that funded your capacity to travel there and now continues to claim a piece of the land, or they claim the land that you work on and you pay royalties or anything like that as well. So I think a lot of people can see the problem in claims of ownership when they have no vested interest. They're just seeking to claim their wealth from it. But even the concept of what he's getting at, those that work the land are the ones who really own it. Really, it reads a bit lower consciousness, but I would say that it's actually a bit deeper than that, because it's understanding the relationship. Those who have the claim to the land the most are the ones who actually in direct relationship, and which, if you go take that a little bit more higher conscious, a little bit more mature, you can understand that really what he's saying is that those that have the right to speak on behalf of the land or to work with it are those who are in the closest stewardship to it.
But the earth never signed the contract.
Well, this gets... Okay, now you're taking us back into metaphysics again. It's funny because the way you mention that reminds me of Dolores Cannon, who developed quantum healing hypnosis technique, which we've spoken about through past life regression and access from our higher selves, where she gave this powerful example that the spirit of the earth, Mother Gaia, as some people might know her, is that she sees the human race like fleas on a dog, and that if they don't actually work with her and they don't actually support her ends, she will just shake us off. And it's funny because as I think about this, what comes to me is, now I was raised Roman Catholic for my first 9 to 10 years, and I always go back to the idea of the biblical flood and the washing away of the impurity and and those who, because Noah was pure in his genes, for example, and so he was saved and spared, but everyone else was washed away and destroyed, out of necessity, essentially. And what's the principle of that? Whether you believe in the book or not, what's the principle? Is that there is some level of earthly consciousness that does have an influence on these sort of natural disasters as well. And not to say that those who've been afflicted were part of some sort of retaliation event. I'm not here to make any claims on that front, but that most people who have never even tried to engage with, say, the spirit of Gaia don't even know how the planet might perceive us. And when you say the Gaia Earth never signed the contract, really, what have we done? We haven't heard her, so we made a claim of ownership. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a country or whether it's our little shoebox that we call our house and land package. It's a claim of ownership over an entity or part of an entity that might not have agreed.
Distinct perspective, my love. And we wanted to bring this concept as it came through in my last QHHT session, where so much wants to be in motion. The universe wants to move. Energy wants to move. But when we apply the construct of ownership, it's attempting to freeze energy and hold it still and stagnant, and then create things that don't need to exist and go against the natural flow of the universe. And again, nature would have to be one of the greatest teachers when it comes to ownership, that the river needs to move. And even I was reading a book by a Turkish author. She's brilliant, Elif Shafak. And the first book that I read from her, she was writing different perspectives from the perspective of a tree. And I've never read a book where she felt that she so wonderfully channeled.
What kind of tree?
A fig tree specifically, who claim themselves to be more superior than other trees, or more mature, more elegant, and no one produces fruits as close to what a fig tree does.
Do you think fig trees actually see themselves like that, though?
We might have to ask that in QHHT.
Yeah, we might.
Yeah. Fun facts next Tuesday as well. But how she was, channeling, she was really highlighting the eco-consciousness and the interconnectedness that every single part experiences at every single point in time, where they know that there's nothing to be possessed. Everything goes back to the earth. The colors, the figs themselves, they are so connected to the cycle. They don't possess anything, and we're all, one living, breathing consciousness. But they understand that they are stewards of, the land that they're in right now and the animals that support their ecosystem.
Just going back to the QHHT session.
Phenomenal session.
Yeah, that really brought us to the concept of ownership as well. It was really fascinating the way your higher self brought it through, because it was so unexpected. And we had other things that we had to speak to, but when this came up, I wanted to take a little further, but I didn't get too much in before we had to keep moving forward. But what I recall your higher self saying is that ownership is really a modern concept. And now we didn't really get a framework for how modern that is. Is that like the last 1,000 years? Is it the last 50,000 years? We didn't fully clarify that one. But what came through next was, it's a modern concept by dark spirits that wish to trap people here. And I've explored conspiracy theories, particularly in the more metaphysical realm as well, and there's others who speak to this, but this was pretty interesting to hear coming from your higher self, because you don't talk like this. You don't really engage in this sort of stuff. And that's sort of what had me on high alert. And then your higher self continued to go on saying, so much becomes redundant if people just drop the concept of ownership. And I thought that was just brilliant of a framing, because that's the moment I knew we had to podcast on this. But still, that concept of dark spirits wanting to trap people on Earth, we're gonna have to go back to explore that even further now, but we'll have to have our tinfoil hats ready for that. But just think about what the world might be like. What might life be like for the human race if we move towards stewardship and dropping the concept of ownership at all? What would it look like? How would things get done? Would even things like money exist? Anything that's contractual really plays into the concept of ownership.
We had a life where it was tribal-esque, and you moved around, you lived off
Yeah, it was
the
very
land.
nomadic sort of.
Yeah.
I want to say like it was like African. It was very, very primitive.
There was no, husband and wife. That didn't exist.
No,
Loosely.
there was some sort of participation in stuff like that, but like it was so fuzzy, it was so soft that they didn't need to have words assigned to it. Even the way of thinking like that, it was incredibly collectivist within the tribe as well. And every person had their part to play. And if you didn't, you would find a part, because that's the way it worked. And so the energy that was conjured through every individual was not, you could say there were contracts forming, but it's very hard to sort of apply that in the way we do today. It was more of just a natural flow of energy exchange, that people sort of felt their way through what was right, what was wrong, what to do, what not to do, when to migrate, when to stay behind when you were old and die. If you couldn't migrate through the next season, it was just one that was, it more just flowed without a direct, again, contracts and this sort of mindset as well. And it wasn't an easy life from what I remember, but it felt very, there was a very strong sense of community and oneness. And as I really connect back to that life, the oneness itself just dispels the elements of these contracts that ultimately have ownership interlaced into them. Whether it's, you think of it today, like my, contract for my time, or I did some extra work recently for a TV show, and what's the contract about? I'm basically giving up my time and my body to stand on set and be part of the background of a camera. And it's a contract that works. And I'm not here to say that we should dismantle the concept of contracting and even ownership of ourselves, because that actually also plays an important role as well, for upholding society and where we are right now. But we also want to move past it eventually as well. We don't want to stay in the terrible twos at a cosmic level for all of human evolution. We'd like to move back to that and go back to more unity and back to more balance. I'm sure most people already understand that the dark spirits that wish to trap people here, these aren't just something that has to be constructed as some sort of metaphysical boogeyman. Look at how many people that are struggling just to put food on the table and pay rent, while others have 5, 10, 50 investment properties, or live in mansions where they are financiers and these sort of positions, and they sit there in a very elitist mindset, thinking, well, that's their fault for being poor. And this goes back to the ownership problem. And if we can start to really understand that these dark spirits, however we want to frame them or conceptualize them, really it's just a thought form in the belief of separation. And if we can start to integrate and rise above that, then we can really start to move back into the oneness and more live in a conscious relationship. And oneness doesn't mean you have to dissolve who you are, but it means you understand yourself through others as well, like the garden, like your children, like even your employment, or even the house you live in. Understand that you are a part of it as it is a part of you. And as we can do that as well, that concept of ownership just naturally begins to blur, and it starts to fade out, and it loses its power that it holds because the contract of separation no longer begins to feel as real, even if it does still continue to play out legally in the third dimension that we experience here.
I think we're due for a channeled session with your higher self on this and everywhere that it can take us. But we wanted to introduce this construct to your awareness to examine the language of mine and how much of that holding on is suffocating and choking and strangling something and causing harm when is it really mine, yours, ours to begin with in the first place.
And even through past lives as well, like you really begin to understand that even the life, these past lives that we've had, and ultimately this one too, if you apply a little bit of logic, really even this life is on rent. We're not permanent in this dimension. We never were. So then really, what do we own?
Try practicing, thank you for visiting, thank you for your presence, thank you for your energy instead of your mind and, asserting that top-down control. And this can apply to, anything as money, as being something in circulation, not in accumulation.
And that's a powerful one we've had in QHHT sessions as well, is people try and hoard money, hoard resources.
Yes.
And there's no flow. The inflow, outflow is imbalanced. And what is money in an economy representative of within our physical body? And you might say that's the blood. It's energy that travels around everywhere. It comes, into the heart and out through the heart, travels around the body and travels back. It's meant to circulate. And that's why economies work on GDP, which is really the level of spending that occurs. They don't care how much wealth there is. They care how much money is moving, because that's what keeps it growing.
Something that we also don't question. It's looking at relationships as partnerships, not property. And
have you known someone who's actually treated a relationship as property? Even if it's in a subtle 21st century sort of view?
Oh, yes, it falls under different banners of loyalty, of...
Oh, loyalty, yeah.
That's an episode, I think. But we haven't even spoken of the body. This life is for rent. This is a temporary home. This is
What's your relationship to your body?
Yeah, this is a temporary vehicle. We are not the body, but the soul wants to play. The soul wants to be here, and it's been given a temporary home.
That's why you'll hear the saying, a healthy man wants 1,000 things, but a sick man only wants one. Like, what's it fundamentally teaching is that the soul doesn't have right relationship with the body. Now, that's not always the case. There can be other circumstances, which I'm not here to diagnose, but even understanding, many people don't know how to have a right relationship to their body. That was one where I discovered through a deep, powerful experience as well, that I don't even breathe right. And I haven't breathed properly since I was very, very young. And it's like, what sort of relationship do you have to your body when you can't even breathe right? And that's not localized to me. Many people do not know how to breathe, not just with their lungs and their mouth and their nose, but this is actually the cosmic breath with their own spirit too. It's the dynamic interplay, and then recognizing like who and what is it that you own again, or what are you not in relationship with, or healthy relationship as well. Because when you own something, well, you can trash it if you want. You see some young people buy cheap cars and thrash them, and it's like, well, it's my property, I can do what I want. But it's like, is it good for the car? Is it good for the world? We know there's something sort of wrong with that, even though we might say, yes, you have the right under the law. But really, if we question something like that, we know it's not the right way to behave. It's a very separatist mindset. But
the more that we come into awareness of this concept, we find that it feels more natural than control. Because we both know what it's like to not be able to breathe. And then, coming into our life now and our home and, in our partnership, There's so much breath, there's so much air. It feels different, and it is, again, far more natural than control.
And we even have a stewardship-based relationship with where we live at the moment as well.
I think we're doing well.
So, really, the bottom line and the biggest takeaway I've discovered and refined with you until we got to the perfect way to close this off is that the soul owns nothing because it is everything.
Yeah. Just got
like I'll give you a moment to just let that sink in. We've done enough work that we understand that the soul itself is so enormous. It needs to create limitation just to know the concept of separation of self, to understand what it means to not have ownership over a part when you ultimately are the whole. Again, it gets back to that oneness element where these contracts of separation and ownership really fall away. But ownership was the cradle that taught us to stand. But I want you to consider that stewardship really is the greater, more conscious and mature step that lets us walk in and towards truth itself. It holds just the same responsibility as ownership, yet it does it in a completely different way, with open hands and an open heart. It knows what lives through us also lives beyond us. And in an infinite reality, how could we not see the obviousness of that truth? As each of us grows into this practice, into stewardship, and learning how to care without just claiming, we begin to lift and rise the collective field. The whole human race begins to shift. The world itself begins to move away from possession and more into a state of participation. So today, tonight, whatever time it is for you, the listener, look around at what you currently call yours. And remember, all of these are just visitors. They're not going to be here forever. But they chose you for a while. And we encourage you to treat them as guests of the infinite. Thank you for listening to Resonant Truth. If this conversation stirred you, share it, question it, live it. Next time, we're going to meet the twin illusion of ownership. Control. We're going to explore what happens when life refuses to obey our plans. Until then, may what moves through you begin to move freely.